All right, I'm just going to quickly show off this parallax background scrolling. Parallax just means that the background moves at a different speed than the foreground. Right now, the zoom of the background and the zoom of the foreground change at the same rate. So like right now, the foreground is zoom 0.65, and then if I move over, it goes to 0.9. That change in zoom is the same for the background too. The only difference with the background is that it moves, the position moves slower. Yeah, that was the main, I spent like an embarrassingly long time figuring this out. That was the main thing that I got wrong, was I thought that the background needed to change scale at a different rate than the foreground. And you can do that, but I think that math is way more complicated, and also it's just not what I want. Because like right now, at 0.5 zoom, the background looks to be about the right size. I wouldn't want it any more zoomed in or more zoomed out. And then if you go over to like 0.1, you know, now the background still is the right size. It's like bigger now, but I wouldn't want it to be any different than this. Like the ratio of the size of the background to the foreground is what I want. So the background scale changes the same as the foreground scale. It's just the positioning moves at an offset, and it creates a nice effect. Normally when you do parallax, you have multiple layers. So like the really far background moves really slow, and then the medium background moves like kind of slow. I may do that. I'm not really sure. It's probably worth it to at least try, but we'll see. What I may end up deciding is that the game will be busy enough, like enough going on with all the enemies walking around and stuff, that I may decide I just don't need that. Although it's probably worth a try. So I'll just show you if I mess around with these numbers a bit. Let me just fix something quickly. I kind of want to change. Whatever. That's kind of bothering. Well, never mind. But anyway, so these are the main like properties that affect the parallax scrolling. So right now, if the offset 0.25 means if the foreground moves 1 pixel, the background will move 0.25 pixels. So if I were to change this to like 0.1, then the background will move even slower. It'll almost match the foreground actually. But see, it's like slightly different. And then if I were to move it to like 0.8, so now it'll move. It looks weird, but it's moving like almost at the same, it's almost matching the way the player moves now. So yeah, like 0.5 would be something I could consider. And then it moves a decent amount. Like 0.5 looks okay actually. I could maybe go for 0.5. But right now I'm leaning toward 0.25. I feel like the background is moving a little bit too much, but I don't know. It's tough to say. If one of these you prefer, you think looks better, leave it in the comments. But right now I'm going for 0.25. So the background just kind of moves a little bit. It almost matches the foreground, but it moves around a little bit. It's a little bit easier on the eyes, I think. You know, it's not. When they move it at too different of a speed, it's like a little bit too much for the eyes, I think. You know, right now I removed all the enemies just for a different reason, but you know, it doesn't look like too much on the eyes right now. But if there's all kinds of stuff on the screen, then maybe it's a little bit too much. But yeah, so that's the offset, and then the scale is just how zoomed in the background is, like. To start with, basically. So yeah, right, 1.25 means that when I actually like the actual image of the background file it just zooms in 25% from what the initial image size is. So if I were to like crank this up to 5, it means it's pretending like the background image is 5 times bigger than it actually is. So here it'll move around the same and zoom in the same. It's just like the background is more zoomed in just by default, kind of. So here, 5 would be terrible because it's stretching the image too much and it doesn't look good. Whereas if I were to do, I haven't even tried this. This might not look right. This might get all messed up, but if I were to like squash the image, oh, it actually worked. You see now it's like too zoomed out. Yeah, I was worried that might not work because actually, maybe, let's see if I go to the right side. Oh, wow, that's impressive. Oh, okay, yeah, never mind. Yeah, I was worried that the amount of tiles I have to put on the screen, I wasn't counting it right, but I actually am counting it right. It takes the size of the tile into consideration when it puts all the tiles on the screen. So never mind. So this is fine. But yeah, I think 1.25 is fine. So like, much of the game will probably be played 0.5 zoom. So the background looks pretty reasonable size here. And then when you come in, you can see like, it's also pretty, it's maybe even a little bit too zoomed in here, but I think since this is pretty much the maximum zoom that you'll ever see, I think it's fine. So yeah, so that's the parallax scrolling. I mentioned like it took a really long time to figure out. I guess the main reason for that is my math skills are like mediocre, and this is really like the difference between fixing this problem quick and slow is like your intuitions about math. So for me, all my intuitions were basically just wrong, and everything I tried was completely wrong. For the longest time, I was changing like the scale at a different rate, and that just messes up all the math. And then I eventually put the I'll show you. So here, these are the layers of the level state. So you have like the tiles, NPCs, rats, enemies, the main character and stuff. What I ended up doing is I put the background tiles in the actual world container. So when I move around the world, I also move around the background tiles. That was the first thing that helped. And then, it's hard to explain, but this is the final math for the parallax scrolling. The pivot, when I move around the player, I move the pivot of the container. And that's one method of doing a camera where when you move around the pivot, it makes zooming in and out super, super easy. So for example, if I were to go like 1, I think, it might show it better. Let's see. Yeah, so for example, now the background's not moving at all when the player moves. So you can see when it zooms in, it's like when the background zooms in and out, it's zooming in and out on the player. Whereas by default, the pivot will be in the top left. So if I didn't move around the pivot and I changed the scale of the background, it'll like shrink down to the top left corner. And then I would have to then readjust it to the player. Whereas when you move the pivot to the target of the camera, which in this case is the player, the zooming is like super convenient. So what I do is I move around the pivot whenever like the target moves around. And then the way Pixie.js handles pivots is when you move the pivot, it moves the actual container over too. So you have to move the pivot and then move the container back in order for it to stay in the same spot and change pivot. So all I'm doing is I figure out how much the pivot moved, how much the target moved in the last frame, and then I get the difference, so it might have moved like 5 pixels. And then I multiply the difference by this offset. So if it moved, 5 pixels, I want to do 25% of that. So then I just readjust it based on the offset, and then if the camera is like frozen, like here, see the camera is not actually moving, only the player's moving, it'll detect if I'm in a situation where the camera's not moving, and then it'll just undo the offset change. So if the camera's not moving, then the background never moves. If the camera is moving, then the background moves at a certain offset from, you know, the other thing, from the foreground. So, you know, if you're like a coder, you might, even just from my bad explanation I just gave, it might make sense and it doesn't look that hard. But trust me, it took like a mad long time to figure this out, just because I'm just not that great at this is actually just arithmetic. Like there's no like anything beyond like grade 6 happening here, or maybe even grade 4. But something about it was totally unintuitive to me. Took me a long time to figure out. Why? Okay. So yeah, so at least I finally got it done. If I want to, I can add like multiple layers of parallax. The only annoying thing left to do is like you have to figure out which tiles are on camera and then only draw the tiles on camera. That's a little bit annoying with the parallax, but it's not that big a deal. If you want to see an example where the parallax isn't working, maybe I'll show you an example of that. Just so you can get an idea, like when I'm trying to fix these bugs. This is like the kind of bugs you might find that are annoying to fix. Although in hindsight, I really should have been able to figure this out quicker. Okay, so for example, here's an earlier version of the code. I'm doing something weird here. So let me just see. Let's say, okay, let's go like this. So I'll say it starts out at 0.4 zoom and then it zooms in to like 1.2 zoom. This is called a zoom range, by the way. It's like a thing, I haven't seen it before in other games. I think it's a pretty cool effect where the zoom changes based on the position of the player. So anyway, but if the player is between these two X positions, it'll like decide the zoom, it'll figure out which zoom it should be between those. So here's an older version of the code where the parallax wasn't working. So like for example, the camera is sitting still here, and yet the background's still moving, which is wrong. And let's see, here even on this side, the background's still moving, just not as much. And like when I'm jumping, the background's moving. Like stuff like that. In hindsight, it was pretty easy to fix, but the main issue was I just didn't know what I was doing. I was kind of getting confused. So yeah, so that's the parallax. And I'll just quickly show you something else. Let's see here. I did that slime earlier, and it took me a while. It didn't take me a while, but oops. I'll just show you. I got the slime in the actual world, so I'll just show you what that looks like. I think maybe this one I can use. So if you want to see what the slime looked like, yeah, there we go. So that's the slime. I think the scale might be messed up actually. It might be stretched a bit. But the slime I animated in a previous video, this is what it looks like in the actual world. So it'll be, oops, I'm pointing at the screen. It'll be crawling along the ground, and when it hits a corner, it'll like crawl up the corner. And then like, yeah, it'll do kind of all kinds of cool stuff. And then I think you're probably gonna be able to jump on it, and that'll make it explode. And yeah, here I didn't actually bother to put in all the proper tiles, so it's like floating a bit, but you wouldn't see that. And then it's also partly transparent, so you can see through it a bit, which looks kind of cool. And then maybe I'll just show you one more thing quickly. Yeah, I like worked around with these buttons a bit. On the main menu, or on the preloader, you can use the mouse on either button. And then on the main menu, when you try to use the mouse, it just says use the keyboard. And then if I am using the keyboard, there's also a secondary tooltip, which it'll tell you which buttons open a new window. So getting all these tooltips to work is a little bit annoying. And then if I have this tooltip open and then I try to click on it, it'll just say use the keyboard. And no matter what I do, it'll always show the proper tooltip. Even if I like do all kinds of weird stuff, it'll always work. But yeah, I kind of like the multiple tooltips. I think I'll probably only use tooltips on the main menu. But yeah, and also if I were to change, like in the future, I'll have like a better language system. I showed it in a previous video, but when you change language, it also recalculates the size of the tooltip, which is also kind of annoying to do. Also, I'll just quickly show, you know, there's the demo version of the game, which is a web game, where you just go to the site and play the game. And then there's the full version of the game, which is a desktop app. So if you want to know the difference on the main menu between the two types of games, I would go demo. Okay, so this is what the demo looks like. So I changed it to be a demo, and then the website looks a bit different on the demo version. I just have to change some HTML also. So on the demo version of the game, there's like a header where there's going to be like buttons and stuff for the website, and then the actual game is like, you know, smaller. And then there's no exit game button on the demo, because there's no reason for that. And then on the demo, on the main menu, there's a buy game button instead of an exit game button. And that'll take you to Steam, where you can buy the full game. Whereas the non-demo, the full game, would look like this. So I'm opening the desktop app now. So this is the full game. So if I opened up the game and I decided I don't want to play the game, I can click exit game. If I open up the game on the main menu, I can also exit here, and then I can like press, you know, to open like a new window. Yeah, this is what the old language system looked like. Let me just see if that still works. I showed it in a previous video. I'm gonna redo the language system to have a better system. But anyway, so yeah, the main thing I wanted to show is the parallax. Is this working? Yeah, here's the parallax. I kind of have gotten the ball rolling a bit better, so you can expect probably once I get the cleanup done, I'm gonna start making some pretty good progress. I think I am already doing pretty well. It's just a lot of the old code I wrote, I changed my entire way of doing things, so now I have to kind of rewrite a lot of stuff. Not rewrite it, but just clean it up. I've said that a bunch of times, but it is it's a legit, you know, it's a useful way of spending my time. It's just you don't see the effects of it until later. So once I finish the cleanup, and I'm continue like working hard, I think each update you'll get a lot more content. But yeah, I'm super excited about this game. I think even though I've made like a pretty weak amount of progress so far, I'm super optimistic about the future. Things are actually going really well right now. But yeah, so I also just got like a lot of work at my job. Like right now I'm like a little bit behind on the work because due to coronavirus, I'm working from home. And when I work from home, I can end up banking up, like basically not working at my job. And then I bank up a bunch of work I'm supposed to do. And now like right now I'm about to stay up all night, like catching up on the work I have to do for my job. But yeah, like right now my job's actually, I only work 4 days a week. Even when I'm not on, when there is no pandemic, I'm on a 4-day week. So I used to be 5-day week, like a normal full-time job where it's 40 hours a week. And then I negotiated my way to a 4-day week. So now normally I would only work 32 hours a week. And then on top of that, now there's the pandemic, and in Germany, some weird thing the government does where when there's a pandemic, they basically pay half your salary, and then you don't have to work as basically I'm only working half the hours I normally would work because the government's helping everyone out. So right now I'm only working 16 hours a week actually, but right now I gotta stay up all night catching up on my work. But anyway, I'm gonna try to focus more on just showing new features in future videos, and probably not even show too much code or talk too much about my personal life. But yeah, anyway, you should know, even though the progress isn't amazing so far, I'm super optimistic. I think it's gonna go really well. Maybe might not be a massive amount of progress next video or the video after that, but at a certain point, you're gonna see, I think, some serious progress. But anyway, that's about it. So take care.